Welcome. I am Christy Swartz, a reporter with E&E News. You are watching the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young debate series. This is the primary election debate for Democratic candidates for Public Service Commission District 4. In order to ensure everyone's safety, candidates are participating from their homes. The Atlanta Press Club gives a special thank you to our broadcast partner, Georgia Public Broadcasting, for helping to organize our video debates. Let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Daniel Blackman was the Senior Vice President for Environmental Affairs and Sustainability at Capital Fortitude Business Advisors. He also partnered with the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan initiative. John Knoll is a former member of the Georgia House of Representatives and is the founder of Energy and Environment, LLC, which is an energy efficiency company. I am joined by Stanley Dunlap, who is a political reporter with the Georgia Recorder. Now, let's get started. Please note, candidates will have 60 seconds to answer their questions and 30 seconds to respond to rebuttals. For the full set of rules, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked 2 questions. Stanley, you get the first question to John Knoll.
Mr. Knoll, your website mentions that you drive an electric vehicle and that you helped install the first Tesla Powerwalls in the state. As a commissioner, how would you encourage more electric vehicle adoption, and how would you work with utilities to do so?
That's a great question, and one that I have great love of. Some people call me a technology and an energy nerd. I was an early adopter. I'm an early adopter of technologies. It's one of the things that I want to change about the Public Service Commission. They move like a glacier. They're very slow and they are out of touch with a lot of things, technology being one of them. So the integration of the solar at a home in Atlanta that I own, you have solar power and batteries, and the electric car can literally get plugged in and charged from the sun. So it's sort of a mind-blowing experience to realize you can become your own utility company with the integration of batteries at night or during emergencies. This sort of innovative thinking is kind of the thing I want to bring to the Georgia Public Service Commission, and I think it's desperately needed in a world where people think coal energy is still great.
Thank you. I will now ask a question to Daniel Blackman. Mr. Blackman, you have robust experience in policy making and in politics, including having made a run for the Public Service Commission before. What spurred you to go after this job again?
I hate to give kudos to what John just said, but the Public Service Commission is currently moving too slow. I not only ran in 2014 for the Public Service Commission, I also served as the chair of the 7th Congressional District, highly contested congressional district now. What spurred me was seeing the families around the state of Georgia that continue to struggle, the calls I've received from senior citizens that are on a fixed income that are, struggling to pay their bills, people that I've been speaking to consistently. Really, I had been thinking about it for the past year. However, in the end of December of 2019, when the base rates were increased both at Georgia Power and Atlanta Gas and Light, it made me very concerning. And then lastly, the confirmation came at the onset of the COVID pandemic, when I actually knew that a lot of our rural students would struggle because of their lack of access to broadband.
Okay, great. Thank you. Stanley, please ask your question to Daniel Blackman.
Mr. Blackman, one of your platforms is bringing high-speed internet to rural Georgia. Recently, the PSC adopted new rules on how EMCs will handle providing broadband in rural parts of the state. Do you agree with these new rules, and what role should commissioners play in encouraging EMCs to make this costly investment?
Well, I actually have an EMC, and I think the rules in place specifically are not enough. I think we need to help to educate communities and do a better job of not just having a map of the state where there are challenges. I think we need to continue to work with EMCs, but I think we also need to get from outside of 244 Washington Street, which is where the Public Service Commission is housed. And we need to go into communities and have community input in a lot of this process. I know for me, I have Sony EMC. They do a tremendous job in communicating, but unfortunately, I've heard people around the state that don't even know what programs exist, and they're struggling. And what I think needs to happen is, one, on my first day, I would review that and make that these access to broadband more accessible, and I'd make sure that we're communicating across the state with what we want to do to make that happen.
Okay, I noticed that John raised his hand. You've got 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Let me just say on broadband, this is a absolutely critical issue. I don't have a disagreement with Daniel on this, except to say we should be doing dramatically more. Whatever he said, it ought to be times two. And the Public Service Commission is absolutely abdicating its responsibility on broadband. Broadband and internet service should be a utility like power and gas. It should absolutely be treated the same way. And the PSC needs to be the advocate for bringing that to rural people and especially kids now in this COVID crisis in Georgia.
Okay, thank you. I will now take the final question in this round, and I will go to John Knoll. And Mr. Knoll, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Blackman. You also have a robust background in politics and in energy policy. I was curious what made you decide to give this job another go. And I'm also wondering what sparked a move to Augusta after living in Atlanta since the Olympics.
Well, Christy, I'd invite you to come down to beautiful Augusta and run the river with me. I love this city. I live here now, and I've enjoyed a new town of Richmond County. The PSC is located in Atlanta, so I retain a residence in Atlanta, but it is here in Augusta that I live, and it is, I think it's important for the city of Augusta to have a statewide elected official. They haven't had one for decades, some people tell me. This whole carving up is a dumb and antiquated system. It was intentionally designed to dilute the voting ability of people to run against the big power company utility-backed candidates. I have followed all the rules.
15 seconds.
And I have changed my residency. Happy to do so. I can run here, but it's all elected statewide. In fact, some people say there should be a challenge to this legally. It's kind of an antiquated and dumb system, but I'm living by the rules.
Time, sir.
I'm following it. Thank you.
Thank you. So that includes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to their opponent. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for rebuttal. By random selection, Daniel Blackman, you may ask the first question to your opponent.
Yeah, so John, my question would be, when you talk about, it was mentioned earlier about your electric vehicle, which is a very expensive vehicle, and your ability to have put solar panels on your home in Atlanta. But 2 million Georgians are living at or below the poverty line. And my question for you is, what is your plan for integrating those folks in the system, seeing that so many people cannot afford to make the changes that you made to position themselves to be more energy efficient?
It's a fair question, Daniel, and I appreciate it. I'll say this. I've been very fortunate when I started my business 20 years ago. I carved it out. I had years I lost money. I made money. I lost money. I made money. I guarantee you I'll take a pay cut going to the PSC. I'm happy to do it because it's exactly the people that you're talking about that I want to serve. It's exactly the reason why we introduced a COVID petition. And if you go on the John Knoll New Energy Guy Facebook page right now, pinned to the top, you will see an option to sign on to the change.org COVID petition that calls for the PSC to forgive power bills or a month of power bills to those in Georgia that have filed unemployment. It's the first thing I thought about when all this unemployment jumped. We have got to help less Georgians who are less than ours right now. And there are so many of Georgians that are. Go to the New Energy Guy website to sign that petition. 3,400 people have already done it.
Okay. Mr. Blackman, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, my only concern with John's plan, we did the same thing, is that I think once the governor made the announcement of a public health crisis, I believe that it should extend far beyond a month. I also believe that reconnection fees should not repenalize ratepayers. So I just wanted to make sure that we made that a point of reference as well.
I agree with that.
Thank you. John Knoll, you may now ask your question.
I have great respect for Daniel. I like Daniel. I'm not gonna ask any tough questions of Daniel. I'm gonna take an unconventional approach here. I'm gonna ask the unnamed candidate, the person who is not in this race per se, but the company that no voters will get to be able to have a say in and get an answer to, and that is the Georgia Power Company. What are they doing? And this is right in line with what Daniel's question to me was. What are they doing to help? And so what the Public Service Commission did is they put in a late fee thing and a no disconnect. Nothing.
Sir, we do need a question.
Yes. The question is, what is the Georgia Power CEO doing during this COVID crisis? And therefore, the answer is, because he's not here to respond, nothing. If you go on the Georgia Power's website, you'll find that they don't have anything. It's all about hopes and prayers and all this kind of thing, and $1 million donation to this sort of thing. Delta's CEO forgoes his pay for the entire year.
Mr. Knoll, Mr. Knoll, we want to give Mr. Blackman a chance. He gets 60 seconds, a chance to respond to your commentary.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's as you said, it's commentary versus the question. What I would respond to is to say that I sat through each and every one of the meetings that were held during the rate case hearings. We even hosted several events. We heard the testimony of the CEO of Georgia Power, and I mean, from a commentary standpoint, I don't think they're doing enough. I think one of the things that we would do from day one is make sure that the CEO of Georgia Power and the CFO comes from out of their McDaniel Street offices and I mean McGill, and they come down and they speak to folks. I think it's not enough for CEOs and CFOs of companies to only have to answer to the Public Service Commission. They need to speak directly to the community, not through a statement on a website or through a public relations communication through a church. They need to be in the offices. Sir. That's my answer, ma'am. Thank you so much for allowing me to respond.
Okay. Mr. Knoll, you do get 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's unconventional, but this is really about a conversation. This isn't. I don't have a gotcha question for Daniel. But I'm telling you, there is another candidate in this race. It's always been true in the Public Service Commission. In the Public Service Commission, these people regulate the utility company monopolies that control our power rates. And Daniel made a good point earlier. It's been creeping up. These mandatory rates, the AJC,
15 seconds.
the Atlanta gas light fees, the mandatory rates. You can use no power right now and still pay higher fees from Georgia Power. It's not fair.
Time.
And somebody's got to stand up.
Thank you. That concludes our second round. And for those just joining us, this is the debate between the Democratic candidates for the Public Service Commission, District 4. Stanley Dunlap and I will continue to question the candidates until we run out of time. I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Candidates may raise their hand if they feel they should get a rebuttal. I will take the first question in this round, and it's from Mr. Blackman. Sir, I noticed that cybersecurity and having a more resilient grid to weather heavy storms is part of your platform. I was curious what your strategy is for working with the utilities about this, and what your response would be if they happen to say, well, we don't want to put upward pressure on rates.
I don't think that's a concern. What utilities want to do in the threats of extreme weather needs to be preceded by the people. When you look at what's going on right now with Governor Kemp ordering the shelter in place, what happens when we go into hurricane season and there's mass displacement? We saw in Nashville, Tennessee, a few weeks ago, a tornado that that killed 16 people and displaced almost 100 people. Well, how do you shelter in place when you have natural disasters? In counties like Burke County, Georgia, where they're overtly affected, in areas like Juliet, Georgia, where coal ash cleanup has already contaminated their water systems. I don't think it's enough for us to put the profits of a company ahead of the will of the people, the safety of the people, and the health of the people. And then lastly, my father served special force in the United States, so I grew up on Fort Benning, Georgia. One of the main things I would do is work with the Department of Energy nationally to bring policies and priorities to this state.
Time. Thank you. Stanley, it's your turn now to ask a question.
Mr. Knoll, what do you see as the most pressing energy issue for Georgians today, and what is your plan to tackle that?
The most pressing energy issue is the diversification of our portfolio. Right now, we've got a lot of coal power still hanging around. We got a lot of natural gas that's derived from fracking sources and other things that are highly suspicious. And we do not have enough solar, and we don't have enough distributed solar. My plan with clean energy would be following the examples like in Savannah, where they have 100% clean energy pledge by 2035. Atlanta, same thing. Athens, same thing. These are communities that are taking the lead because the Public Service Commission has abdicated the responsibility. So who better than a 20-year person in the business that understands it and knows how to deal with it to take that on? I'm very happy to do this. This is something that has been a passion for me. I'm as I like to say, I'm a farm-grown environmentalist. I believe, and yet I'm a business owner of long standing. And I believe that there are ways to both be good to the planet, which is our greatest challenge right now, and to also bring clean energy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Time. Daniel, you raised your hand. You get 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Yes. So basically, one of the things that I think is very important to highlight is that the public service from a net metering standpoint last year, I think it was for 5,000 solar installations, which was 32 megawatts of energy. My concern with what John said is only that we both agree that Georgia needs to be more aggressive on attaining a clean energy future, but we need to be able to start talking about community solar and other ways to bring renters and low-income families into the fold. Too many low and moderate income families cannot afford $10,000 to $15,000 to install solar systems on their own homes, and we need to make sure that we expand that opportunity.
That's right.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will take the next question. Mr. Knoll, this one's for you.
Yes.
Kind of riffing off of what you said. So coal's been out of favor for a while, largely because the economics just don't make sense anymore. There are some sitting commissioners who are concerned about not having a diverse energy mix if all of the coal plants are shut down. I suspect you don't agree with that. But what would you want to see on the grid to ensure that there's a diverse and reliable portfolio?
So Southern California Edison just put out a contract for 770 megawatts of battery storage. This is a huge battery bank. Australia, I was in Sydney years ago. The power was about to die in Sydney, and Elon Musk tweeted the prime minister and said, "I'll fix your power problem in 90 days or it's free." What did he do? He put a huge multi-megawatt battery out there to grab the wind power at night, generated at night, so they could use it during the day during peak periods. Smashing success in Australia. What we're seeing now is solar cheaper than coal, solar cheaper than nat gas. The only thing cheaper than solar is wind, and we have offshore wind potential, over the horizon wind potential that we're not even reviewing because Southern Company and Georgia Power won't let us look at it. The point is, we can go to a clean energy, green energy future.
15 seconds.
There's a reason I have this pin on from the Climate Reality Project that I attended with Al Gore. This is a climate emergency. And the utility companies make up 50% of and energy makes up 50% of the consumption.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question, Stanley, go ahead.
Going for Mr. Blackman and kind of leading off of that, what do you see as the future of renewable energy in Georgia?
Well, if you look at where we are right now in the state, I don't think we're doing enough to bring coastal Georgia into the fold. Again, the wind energy potential that was mentioned is very critical. I would push for research and investment into schools like Georgia Southern, where we can look at the potential of our wind energy. I would look at opportunity zones throughout the state. Most of the rural poor areas in the state of Georgia are in what's classified as opportunity zones, where they can then adopt certain programs and opportunities. So my biggest concern is the investments we're making to the infrastructure. We talk a lot about food deserts in rural areas around the United States. We don't talk about information deserts. The technology gap, as we've mentioned earlier, has gotten far too wide, and we're entering into a point where we're going to leave generations behind. The last thing I'll say on that point is one of the reasons that I would push directly for energy infrastructure and technology is so that we can create an adequate clean energy workforce of the future.
Boom. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And if I may add to that, is it possible to do a 30-second rebuttal on that?
Did you raise your hand?
I did. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I got nothing under the wire. Yeah. The point is exactly what Daniel, I want to mirror Daniel's comment on this. It is a clean energy future, but it is also what the Republicans have been doing for 15 or 20 years is telling how much they care about rural Georgia and building 4-lane highways to rural Georgia instead of building internet highways to rural Georgia. And now we're paying the reasons for that bad decisions. They mouth a lot about helping, and in reality, they're not helping. And so what PSC should be doing, what Daniel and I would do, is to fight for those people in the rural communities that need this service.
Okay, thank you. Time. I've got the next question, and it's for Mr. Blackman. Energy and environmental justice is an important issue in Georgia. I know you know that, but it's really hard to get that topic discussed in the PSC hearing room because it's hard to put a dollar sign on what is typically seen as a social issue and is something that is outside the scope of something like poles and wires. So how would you work with your colleagues and with the industry to change that, to actually bring that debate into the hearing room?
It's really simple. We need to start directly working with civic organizations. I've been on calls for the past week with the American Association of Blacks in Energy. We've been talking about the diverse effects and impacts on communities of color. I don't think we can talk about environmental justice or policy without talking about energy equity. The reality is not just for poor people, but specifically for poor minority communities. These underserved and underheard communities have been left out of the conversation. And the problem that we're having is not that we're not having the conversations, it's an unwillingness to do it in and out of an election year. So what I would do first and foremost, number one, work with historically Black colleges around the state of Georgia. Two, bring individuals from around the state into these meetings so that we can have these discussions. And then lastly, we need to make sure that we are very, very intentional and direct about how poverty and lack to access to clean energy is affecting people, not just from the water they drink, but from the air they breathe. We need to stand up and be fearless at the commission and not put profits ahead of people.
Time. Do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I do. This is the question of our times right now with COVID. In fact, tomorrow night, Tuesday night, we'll be having a discussion on energy equity in this annual Tuesday evening discussion that we do with my running mate in Savannah, Robert Bryant. Broadband,
15
energy,
seconds.
These are items that we can absolutely address. Tomorrow night, we'll be with Corinna Gore talking about that and what she's doing. This is a world that we are missing, the opportunity to help those that are having problems financially.
Time. We have time for one last question, and Stanley, the floor is yours.
I guess would be for Mr. Knoll. The
Yes,
PSC is currently entirely made up of Republicans. So if you're elected,
tell me about it.
You will be the sole Democrat. What kind of approach would you take to present new ideas to them?
So late last year, I started. I'll answer it two ways. I have 60 seconds. So late last year, I went around the southern part of Georgia. That's that other district. These stupid district lines they draw to find a candidate that could run and help in changing the PSC because there are 2 seats up. And I found that person in Robert Bryant out of Savannah. He's an African American PhD. Strong, native of Savannah, most likable guy you'll meet. Robert Bryant and I joined forces because we believe that in running as a tandem, we are stronger. And in the end, when we win, we'll have 2 seats of the 5 seats. And I've developed relationships on the PSC to be able to turn, I think, some of these Republicans and vote with us. So it's a collaborative process. It's about turning into a majority, and I think we can change that very much.
Okay, time. And that is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. And John Knoll, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be a candidate for the PSC. It has been my life's work of 20 years in the energy efficiency space. I have saved residential homeowners money. I have saved businesses money. We do projects around the country. I want to save you money. And I know that they spend too much at Georgia Power Company and Atlanta Gas and Light. I know these are insidious bills. I know that the largest problem we face right now in the world is climate change. But trumped by that, excuse me for using the term, but superseded by that is the COVID crisis. And that requires us to immediately address concerns for people who are lower income or are unemployed. The Public Service Commission can be that entity.
15 seconds.
They're abdicating their responsibilities. I'm a farm-raised environmentalist. My running mate, Robert Bryant, and I can change Georgia for the better and help on a Public Service Commission nobody's heard of. Help us fight for you in the June 9th primary. Thank you.
Mr. Blackman, I saw you raised your hand as we were moving into this round. I apologize, but the floor is now yours for your 60-second closing.
Not a problem at all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I was raised in Columbus, Georgia, moved to Atlanta, Georgia to go to Clark Atlanta University, and have now made my personal residence for my family and I in Forsyth County, Georgia, which traditionally has been an extremely red district. In that process, we have worked to flip 2 precincts. We have helped to increase the capacity for a Democrat to run and win in the 7th congressional district. And we've had conversations from South Georgia, where you have counties like Lowndes County, all the way up to North Georgia, where you have counties like Raven. We're not going to stop doing that. We're committed to the work and to the effort. But the only way we get there is by working with certain groups around this state to ensure the longevity and the efficiency of the Public Service Commission. So I want to let our unions know today that we're willing to work with you to create that workforce of the future that makes sense for all of us. And I want every single person that's living check to check to know right now that our workforce of the future includes you, senior citizens on a fixed income, and anyone that is working hard should be able to have someone that is reliable, that will not put profits ahead of people. Thank you,
sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That concludes our debate. We would like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, June 9th, and that early voting begins May 18th. I thank the candidates for participating in the debate, and to Stanley Dunlap, especially, for assisting me today. I also would like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's debate. For more information on the full schedule of primary election debates, please visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting website, gpb.org. I'm Christy Swartz. Thank you for joining us in the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young debates.
Thank you.